Air moves in and out of the lungs in response to differences in pressure. When the air pressure within the alveolar spaces falls below atmospheric pressure, air enters the lungs, inspiration. Provided the larynx is open, when the air pressure within the alveoli exceeds atmospheric pressure, air is blown from the lungs, expiration. The flow of air is rapid or slow in proportion to the magnitude of the pressure difference. Because atmospheric pressure remains relatively constant, flow is determined by how much above or below atmospheric pressure the pressure within the lungs rises or falls. Alveolar pressure fluctuations are caused by expansion and contraction of the lungs resulting from tensing and relaxing of the muscles of the chest and abdomen. Each small increment of expansion transiently increases the space enclosing lung air. When the muscles of inspiration relax, the volume of chest and lungs decreases, lung air becomes transiently compressed. Its pressure rises above atmospheric pressure, and flow into the atmosphere results until pressure equilibrium is reached at the original lung volume. This, then, is the sequence of events during each normal respiratory cycle. Lung volume change leading to pressure difference, resulting in flow of air into or out of the lung and establishment of a new lung volume. The forces that normally cause changes in volume of the chest and lungs stem not only from muscle contraction but from the elastic properties of both the lung and the chest. A lung is similar to a balloon in that it resists stretch, tending to collapse almost totally unless held inflated by a pressure difference between its inside and outside. This tendency of the lung to collapse or pull away from the chest can be measured by carefully placing a blunt needle between the outside of the lung and the inside of the chest wall, thereby allowing the lung to separate from the chest at this particular spot. The pressure measured in the small pleural space so created is substantially below atmospheric pressure at a time when the pressure within the lung itself equals atmospheric pressure. This negative, below atmospheric, pressure is a measure, therefore, of the force required to keep the lung distended. The force increases, pleural pressure becomes more negative, as the lung is stretched and its volume increases during inspiration. The force also increases in proportion to the rapidity with which air is drawn into the lung and decreases in proportion to the force with which air is expelled from the lungs. In summary, the pleural pressure reflects primarily two forces. 1. The force required to keep the lung inflated against its elastic recoil and, 2. The force required to cause airflow in and out of the lung. Because the pleural pressure is below atmospheric pressure, air is sucked into the chest and the lung collapses, pneumothorax, when the chest wall is perforated, by a wound or by a surgical incision. The force required to maintain inflation of the lung and to cause airflow is provided by the chest and diaphragm. The muscular partition between chest and abdomen, which are in turn stretched inward by the pull of the lungs. The lung-chest system thus acts as two opposed coiled springs, the length of each of which is affected by the other. Were it not for the outward traction of the chest on the lungs, these would collapse, and were it not for the inward traction of the lungs on the chest and diaphragm, The chest would expand to a larger size and the diaphragm would fall from its dome-shaped position within the chest. The role of muscles. The respiratory muscles displace the equilibrium of elastic forces in the lung and chest in one direction or the other by adding muscular contraction. During inspiration, muscle contraction is added to the outward elastic force of the chest to increase the traction on the lung required for its additional stretch. When these muscles relax, the additional retraction of lung returns the system to its equilibrium position. Contraction of the abdominal muscles displaces the equilibrium in the opposite direction by adding increased abdominal pressure to the retraction of lungs, thereby further raising the diaphragm and causing forceful expiration. This additional muscular force is removed on relaxation and the original lung volume is restored. During ordinary breathing, muscular contraction occurs only on inspiration, expiration being accomplished passively by elastic recoil of the lung. At total relaxation of the muscles of inspiration and expiration, the lung is distended to a volume, called the functional residual capacity, of about 40% of its maximum volume at the end of full inspiration. Further reduction of the lung volume results from maximal contraction of the expiratory muscles of chest and abdomen. The volume in these circumstances is known as the residual volume. It is about 20% of the volume at the end of full inspiration, known as the total lung capacity. Additional collapse of the lung to its minimal air can be accomplished only by opening the chest wall and creating a pneumothorax. The membranes of the surface of the lung, visceral pleura, and on the inside of the chest, parietal pleura, are normally kept in close proximity. Despite the pull of lung and chest in opposite directions, by surface tension of the thin layer of fluid covering these surfaces. The strength of this bond can be appreciated by the attempt to pull apart two smooth surfaces, such as pieces of glass, separated by a film of water. For more upcoming video lectures, kindly like, share and subscribe the Learning Point and make your future bright.